Bonjour. Welcome to another episode of Man Law.
The podcast.
My name is Anita Mayu,
I'm Rene Whitmore.
and we're both from this huge town in central Louisiana called Simmesport on the great Atchafalaya River.
Yeah, Atchafalaya River is a major distributary of the Mississippi. As a matter of fact, the Mississippi wants to come into the Atchafalaya River completely.
And wipe us all out.
Yeah. And of
You
course,
know,
the Corps of
Mississippi.
Engineers has been trying for 60, 70 years to try and stop that happening. But yeah, and of course, being right on the banks of the river was always a part of your life
Oh,
growing up. I mean,
absolutely.
from
Absolutely.
fishing to swimming on a sandbar,
Yeah.
which is probably one of the most dangerous things in the world.
We didn't know that.
No.
Going swimming at the mud hole, you couldn't even see your hand right below
Well, yeah,
the
you have
water.
to hose off when you got home.
Yeah, you come out, your clothes is all brown and stained from swimming in that water. We didn't care.
Yeah, then you cut your foot on a little beer tab.
Oh my
somebody
God.
had left.
Yeah, or a beer bottle. My daughter did that.
Yeah, that's another one.
Cut her foot on a beer bottle at the mud hole. Man
Yeah.
law. That was a man law moment.
Yeah, that was another.
Talk about ruin your day.
that was a La Mad moment. right
Yeah,
there.
tornado.
Yeah, and of course, coming off the Atchafalaya River, right near Simmesport, is Bayou de Glaise, which I think goes from Simmesport all the way to Bunkie.
Where does Yellow Bayou come from?
Yellow Bayou came off of
Bayou de Glaise?
Bayou de Glaise.
Okay.
Yeah, it's cut off by the levee now. A lot of bayous. Daddy's oldest brother, Uncle AJ Whitmore. I mean, he was born in 1912 or something like that.
Good Lord.
But he can remember before they put some of the levees up that he used to be able to get in these little bayous, Sawmill Bayou and stuff that came right here and paddle all the way down to Woodside.
Dang, all right.
Yeah, uninterrupted. They were flowing waters,
Right. Well, I tell people when I was in New Orleans, when they'd ask me where I was from, I'd tell them I'm a Maya, and I was born and raised between Yellow Bayou and the Atchafalaya. And if you want to know how to say my last name, it sounds like Bayou, but it's called Maya. That's how we say it here. The proper pronunciation is called Mayu in French. When you're talking, trying to be proper, when you're like me, I was working in the film industry, so I'd say Mayu, but it's not Mayo, it's not my ex.
You have an X on the end of yours. Huh?
Yeah.
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 So you're a Maya, not a Mayu.
I'm a Maya, not a Mayu.
I love how they make that distinction. Yeah.
Even though we're all related.
Yeah.
Tonad.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think
Melon.
Bayou de Glaise, I think it ran all the way through Moorville, Cottonport.
Oh yeah, it still does.
Yeah, all the way through. I don't know how far it went past Bunkie.
Where does it end?
I don't know. I never.
We're gonna have to
traced it
figure
down.
that out.
If you know,
if you know, let us know. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's gonna be our tagline. If you know, let us know.
Yeah. Well, technically, I guess it would be where it begins. Because, well, I don't know.
Well, doesn't it begin right back here past the dump at the
Yeah, I don't know if
Atchafalaya
that's where-
River?
I don't know if it dumps into the Atchafalaya River or if the
Or if it
Atchafalaya River
River
dumps
feeds
into
into it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what dumps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dump at the dump.
Yeah, dump at the dump.
It
Yeah.
dumps at the dump.
Yeah. You get a free prize if you cut bicycle forks off at the old dump to make a chopper on your bicycle.
Oh my God.
But that's another podcast.
Yeah.
How to modify
Oh
your
my
bicycle
God. Yeah.
with a banana seat and some cords on the spokes.
Yeah, to make it or some straws.
Oh, yeah.
If you were lucky enough to get plastic straws
Right.
to put on the spokes.
Yeah.
But getting back, we digress down another rabbit
Yeah.
hole, as us Cajuns do. We start talking and then we get sidetracked with another conversation
Yeah.
and then another conversation. But we're talking about the Atchafalaya River and the bayous that we were born and raised on here.
And the Atchafalaya, we learned earlier, is actually not an old river by river standards. It's not thousands of years old. I think they estimated it formed in 1588 or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, when the Mississippi made a cutoff in front of the Red, and what they later called Turnbull Island.
Yeah,
When the Captain Shreve cut a channel through it,
right.
and that's began
By the mud hole.
Atchafalaya River. Yeah,
By the mud hole that
Right.
by the locks and stuff. Actually, my grandfather had a camp out there, and I was raised on Turnbull Island pretty much. During the winter, we were out there every weekend.
Yeah, then there was deer hunting and fishing. And,
Yeah. I remember when I was a young girl, the Mississippi River had come up pretty high, and the back then, they would get to the camp by boat. They launch here in Simmesport at the launch, boat launch, and go up the river by boat. We go up the river by boat to the camp, but then the water had gotten really high, so they had to move the camp away from the bank of the river. And I remember distinctly that I was little, I couldn't have been no more than maybe 4 or 5 years old, maybe not even that old, them putting the camp on logs and rolling it away from the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they did the same thing in the flood of '73 when they were taking Papa's freezers from the fish market down the river.
Yeah.
They rolled it up the levee on some logs to get it on this side.
I can remember during that high water, those alligators would come out and sleep on your grandma's porch.
Yeah.
Some big ones, too.
Edison Jr., my little brother, was a baby because it was in '73. So he was born in '72, so he was little. I remember I can still see it as plain as day. Him on my mama's hip. And they say that a baby alligator cries like a human baby. And so to make the alligator come out of my grandma's house, because they lived on the other side of the levee on the river bank, my mama would pinch my little brother, and he'd start crying, and that alligator would come swimming out the front door of my grandma's house, and we'd all start screaming, "Ah, alligator, run!"
You use your little brother as a call.
Yeah, just
like
so
a
we could
duck
see
call.
the alligator. And now they have them at the casino in Marksville.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, I was in New Orleans and one of my friends was like, "Hey, you want to go on a swamp tour?" And I looked at her and I was like, "I am a swamp tour. What are you talking about?" Like, plus, no, I want to go see some alligators. I've been seeing that my whole life.
Yeah, no kidding. But then, the fishing industry was a mainstay in Simmesport
Yeah.
for a long, long time.
Yep.
Mr. Murphy LaCour, I think he had a floating fish market first.
I don't know about him specifically, but I do know my great great grandfather on the Rusk side, and my great grandfather John Rusk. They had houseboats.
Yeah.
That they lived on, and they would fish and sell fish up and down the river off of their boat.
Mr. Jack Bonnet and them were born on a houseboat.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a picture somewhere on Facebook or something. One of my cousins tagged me in, the whole Rusk family, like 13 of them, that were living on this huge houseboat.
And Miss Marguerite Rusk would know. We need to talk to her.
Yeah.
But I think Uncle Murphy had a floating fish dock down there, or Wayne Coco would know, by the river. And then he contracted with, I think, the Bunkie Ice and Utilities or something like that. The sign's still on Main Street over there. That's all that's left of it. And built what we knew as the big fish market over there.
We need to get a picture of that.
Yeah, he sold fish from Louisiana all the way up to Chicago into New York. I mean, train cars of fish.
Right.
Well,
yeah, because the place was right by the train tracks.
Yeah, they built that spur.
Right.
It ran behind the old cotton gin.
Yeah.
And ended at Uncle Murphy's at the ice house. Just for him to ship fish.
Wow.
Carp, he would ship tons of that stuff up north.
Well, my dad, my grandfather and my dad too, they pretty much, like, when his ice house shut down and stuff, and my grandfather actually took over my great grandfather's fish business and started his own fish market on the river. It was on the river till the flood of '73, and then they moved it. He built the one by our house.
Yeah.
And then Daddy and Uncle Junior had that. Then they got into it, and Daddy moved by the river again. And my daddy's fish market was my grandfather's car garage. They converted it to a fish market.
Yeah.
But hey, Cajun ingenuity,
That's right.
We're like the MacGyvers of everything.
Yeah, and Uncle Murphy LaCour.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, Murphy LaCour was my grandmother Whitmore's brother.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, but he was very politically active and knew the Longs really well. As a matter of fact, that same Uncle AJ, my dad's oldest brother, who's passed away now, but he remembers, he said about once a month, the train would back down there and they would fry fish with Huey Long and play bourrée.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that must be a Simmesport tradition, because
fish and play boomerang.
before the casino opened in Marksville, actually my daddy's fish market was a fish market by day and a casino by night.
Oh, boomerang casino.
On Wednesday nights they would have these suppers,
Yeah.
and they would shoot dice. It was dice games that were going down there. But of course, we all grew up under a card table. Before that, on the weekends we would go. Daddy would take us and we'd go to an aunt or somebody's house, and from Friday to Sunday they'd play cards and cook, and we'd sleep under the card table. I knew
The river was a huge part. Mr. Kidi Doza, his son Alvin still lives right here across the street from me. You could smell when they would tar in nets because they used to have to heat those blocks of tar with a propane, and they would dip those nets in there and then, raise them up on that homemade crane they had and then stretch them out on the fence to dry.
Well, before that, even before the propane, my Uncle Junior, his name is Milton Mayu Jr. I didn't know any of my family's real names till I graduated from high school, by the way, because everybody has a nickname.
Yeah, that's true.
So they called him T. June. We called him Uncle Junior, but his real name was Milton. He had a tar vat right behind our house, and there was, it was a China ball tree.
Oh, yeah.
That was a huge China ball tree.
I don't know what the official scientific name for it is, so we called it a China ball tree.
We would use it with slingshots.
Yeah, make a little pop gun, too, with the China ball.
But we had a China ball tree in our backyard, and right on the edge of our backyard, he had a tar vat. But it was in the ground, and there was like a trench around it that he would put firewood, and he would build a fire and melt the tar
in that
vat and dip his nets from this big pulley that was hanging from the tree. And we, of course, we were lucky enough he would give us a stick when he'd raise the nets out of the river, and they were full of weeds and
algae
grass and all that stuff.
And
we were tasked with beating the nets and getting all the old dried weeds off before he dipped them. And I can still distinctly remember the smell of that tar burning and him dipping those nets when I was young, really young girl. But everybody had to participate. Yeah. I remember them when they would make them. There was always a nail by a door in a door frame that they would hang the twine on, and they had these the little net needles.
Right.
I want to say Miss Wanda Morrow has some of Uncle Charles.
Yeah, Mr. Charles.
And Aunt Helen's, because back then the women and the men, the women fished with their husbands up until, I know Aunt Marguerite and Uncle Truman, she fished with him as long as I can remember. And my grandmother, I don't remember her too much going out with Papa, because I don't think he fished as much as he ran the fish market.
Yeah.
But Aunt Ruby went with Uncle Junior, and Aunt Helen went with Uncle Charles. So it was a family thing.
Yeah, I remember they had the spacer blocks.
Yeah.
Of course, most
to
people
make your netting,
the
however,
holes,
if you wanted, however big you need. If you wanted a 1-inch hole, a 2-inch, or whatever, they had the spacer blocks.
And they would wind that string on that little pyramid thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And they called it a macaque, which is French for monkey, because it would jump around and dance when you would pull the string off of it.
Yep.
I remember watching them do that. Yeah. I was fascinated by how they could memorize how that pattern is supposed to go.
Right. I've watched my Uncle Junior build a wooden boat from strips of wood, and putting it together with clamps and stuff to hold it while it was gluing, Mr. Pot Kimball behind our house, him too, he would fish and had nets and build boats. And Pa Bon, he still builds boats, but he builds the aluminum ones now.
And I think this was in the 90s when Mr. Wayne Coco had written that book about the fishing industry.
Mm-hmm.
They opened an exhibit at the library. Mm-hmm. And I think Miss Lori and Miss Effie, it might have been, showed them how they would make the hooks out of wood.
Oh, yeah.
Where they would draw the oak staves down, and they had a big kettle that they would bend them. And then nail them together and tie them with string, and make those things 7 and 8 foot hooks,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was no cranes to pull those things in with back then. Those men would do it by themselves.
Back then, though, also, because this is so much of a river town, you didn't have people working outside of their family. if a family owned a business, then everybody worked in that business.
Yeah, that's true.
But my grandfather had his fish market. All his sons worked in the fish market. My grandmother was the cook, and took care of the house and stuff. Same thing with on my mama's side. My grandfather was a farmer. All the kids farmed the land with them. And growing up in town, I don't, except for the few people that maybe went off to work at Angola, nobody really left the town to go to work.
No, not
everybody stayed here working.
People started working turnarounds. And
yeah,
stuff
they
like
started
that,
working turnarounds back when the plants started coming up in Baton Rouge, or every now and then you'd find somebody that would do like sandblasting or pressure washing stuff. But it was mainly family contained. I know my grandfather had his fish market, and all of my dad and his brothers worked it. And then when they went off and did their own thing, like my Uncle Noonie, he worked for the railroad. My Uncle Morris worked for the railroad.
Yeah.
But he pretty much sat at the railroad bridge, which is right there across the river from where my grandfather's fish market was. So he wasn't far from home, Like it wasn't like now where we go work for someone else for pay. The whole family pitched in and ran the business and got paid. When my grandfather sold his business to my dad, his fish business to my dad and my uncle, he opened a grocery store across the river that sold fishing supplies and hunting supplies and groceries, and him and my uncle ran that. Well, guess what? When we got old enough, he opened it in 76, I was 9, and I remember going work at that store every summer when I was a child, stocking shelves, filling coolers. On doing Christmas Day, he was the only store that would open on Christmas Day. Like Christmas afternoon, we'd have Christmas morning at his house, and then we'd all go, and he'd let his workers off, but we had to work, selling firecrackers and whatever. I was running a cash register from like the time I was 11 years old till I graduated. I worked in my dad's fish market.
Yeah, and with the river, I can well remember, I think my brother James was in high school maybe, but we would borrow Donald Ray's boat and go down and get shad for extra money.
For extra money.
And go sell it at the fish market.
Yeah.
Except when you hit one of them big goo
and
try to pull him in.
Oh, God. A red-ass goo.
Yeah. Of course, you'd bring that to one of those old ladies and he would cook that.
Oh, and that old slime gravy. That's why I don't like fish till this day. Like, I was raised in a fish market, and I'll eat catfish and gorefish, and that's about it. Because if it tastes like a fish, I don't want it. It tastes like I'm licking the floor of my daddy's fish market.
The river was it offered seasons like spring and fall because you had the spring flood, and now it's all kind of skewed. But I remember crawfish season was when the water started going back down. And those bean fields would flood, and when the water would recede, you'd go out there and be knee high.
Yeah, you could.
And you used to go with your little pyramid traps and catch crawfish.
Some set nets.
Yeah, that's before people thought crawfish were good.
My 21st birthday, I spent across from Jacko's in those pits across the levee before they fenced it off. Me and my cousin Brett and Roxanne had a fifth of Boone's Farm.
Oh, my Lord.
Strawberry Hill.
Y'all went all out on that
Some
one.
cut-off shorts, barefooted with a stick and some set nets because I wanted some crawfish for my birthday. That was what I wanted to do for my 21st birthday. My cousin Brett looks over at me. I'm walking with my net, my bottle of Boone's Farm in a paper bag.
In a paper bag, of course.
And a net across my shoulder. And I'm walking along the bank, mud going between my toes. He said, look at you. He said, boy, if your ass ain't country, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that would have made a good T-shirt, a meme back then, before there were memes.
What other 21-year-old female do you know wants to go crawfishing barefooted with a bottle of Boone's Farm for her birthday?
With your beef milk or your chicken bits?
Some fish heads.
Oh, fish heads,
from Daddy's Fish Market. Right. Them buffalo heads that way were full of blood.
Yeah.
You had to cut that in half, and you put half in there. Boy, them crawfish ate that up. Yeah.
And remember back then there was no Tony Chachere's.
Oh, no.
You had
salt,
ranch, crab boil, and salt and pepper. That was it.
Salt and pepper.
And some lemons.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
But you make you a little fire, you find you whatever little pot you could, boil you some water, throw that in there, crawfish.
Yeah.
Voila.
Yeah. Right.